good evening, everyone. I am Jonathan McNamara, and you are listening to another episode of JMU Sound Off. The Dukes coming in to tonight's episode after a 31-23 win over South Alabama, bringing the record to 5-0 on the season. First time all year we had all four members of the Sound Off team together. Chandler, fortunately, wasn't able to be there because he's doing his coaching thing, but we finally were able to get a group picture, including Annie, our student correspondent from JMU. So a really great day for all of us at the Sound Off. At Bridgeforth, we had a lot of people coming up to us and saying, love listening to the show. We had some people who had some of our Sound Off merchandise on, and we're going to be talking about all of those things as we go throughout tonight's episode. Did want to right off the bat mention our friends from Skyline Financial had a chance to interact with Tim Nelson and his crew on Saturday, which was great to see him. And again, he voiced his support of the podcast. We're so grateful for what Skyline Financial is doing to help us grow this podcast. And as always, be sure to check them out at skylinefinancialpartners.com. Also ran into Cliff Wood with the Montpelier Collective. They were out there with their tent promoting the collective and talking about ways that you can support student athletes. So as always, visit them at montpeliercollective.com. And with that, bring in the rest of our Sound Off team who had another day at Bridgeforth where our blood pressures were a little higher maybe than we would like on a Saturday afternoon, but we'll get into the game after we talk about, guys, we all had a lot to say and a lot of in our private chats before the podcast tonight, but we thought from our experience from Bridgeforth. So I'll start with you, Taylor. Had the opportunity to sit with you for the overwhelming majority of the game and your family. Your thoughts on what, at least from my perspective, a really great day in terms of the Bridgeforth Stadium's atmosphere. A lot of great things, a lot of new things brought out in terms of how the music was incorporated, as well as some new features from the concession stand perspective. But just curious again what you saw from your point of view inside Bridgeforth on Saturday.
One thing I want to just give kudos to is JMU's athletic department really does pay attention to the fan voice, and they not only pay attention, they take action. They see where room for improvement can exist, and they're giving some pretty good efforts. I mean, they're even bringing in a lot of outside help at times. So I know there's some times where people still see some areas for improvement. But JMU listens, and I can say, having worked at another institution and being around a lot of others, I think that is something that JMU does exceptional compared to what would be the national standard. So all around, I thought the entrance of the team went off a little better than Bucknell. If we remember, there was a little hiccup there last time. I'll let Michael and Steve kind of get into the in-game atmosphere, but I mean, really good DJ music, the sound in between timeouts, commercial breaks. Concessions, I think, JMU is doing as good as they can kind of with what they have. I think there are some innovative ideas that maybe they can still pursue, but the structure of the stadium, the way it's laid out, there are concession areas that get more crowded than others, and I think some others haven't really ventured off to some other areas of the stadium, so I would encourage them to do that. The entry lanes, I had a great entry experience. I got in about 11:25, about 35 minutes kickoff, walked right up to the gate. I did hear some people coming in about 10 minutes before kickoff complaining about long lines. And I'm just going to say, everybody, our stadium is set up where Godwin Hall takes up a big chunk of real estate on one side and Newman Lake takes a big chunk of real estate on the other. So you don't have this beautiful bowl stadium with entrances all around. I will say friends of ours that came right around kickoff did go around to E-Gate and walked right in the entrance over there near the lake. So encourage our fans to get there early. When the skydivers came in, it was a pretty cool thing. Stadium was nowhere close to full, especially any students listening. I promise you the extra 20, 30 minutes that you take to get in the stadium will pay off for your experience in game. And the only thing I don't want to harp on it too much because a lot of people had a lot of positive things to say about the crowd on Saturday. I think it was good, borderline great. I just really said I really want to see people in there early at kickoff, have a full stadium. And it was tough watching, we're down one score in the fourth quarter. And we had probably 10 to 12,000 people in the stadium there. I know we got up big late in the game, but Signetti, even in his press conference, mentioned this isn't the CAA anymore. We're not going to get teams by 40 points every week. And we need you in there until the end. And this is a great team. We're 5-0 for the second year in a row. They've done a lot to earn our ability to stay the full game. So overall, great Saturday.
Yeah, and bravo, as you noted, to this team helping people get into the gates. I agree with you wholeheartedly that it was a much better experience, and I give credit to Kevin Warner and the JMU communication staff. They were very deliberate this week in putting out those graphs, saying, "Hey, there are gates that some of us who consider ourselves the most plugged in JMU fans imaginable didn't even know existed." I saw the sports blog guys were putting some stuff out, didn't know if E-Gate had just been created this week. I know I thought that because I didn't know it existed, and it just shows again to your point they're listening. They also did the same thing to show that there were locations for concessions that may fans not have ever gone to or didn't know offered what they did. So again, this continues to be a work in progress, but it shows they're not just saying, hey, we put out some stuff at the beginning of the year saying there's changes. They're making those changes in real time. They're evaluating these things that they go. I'll say, if you're watching this broadcast, let us know in the comments. We'll put your comments here on the broadcast. What was your experience like with concessions, with entering the gates? This is great feedback as we all try to move forward. But as we go throughout the show, we'll feature some of your comments. Steve, I want to bring you into the conversation. I know you were pumped, and Alice as well, about some of the music selection. Definitely from my perspective, looking up at the Sunday Night Football game that's going on and the conversation around Taylor Swift. One of the cooler moments for me was hearing Taylor Swift played over the loudspeaker and seeing how passionate the reaction was from the student section to the left of where I sit in section 109. They loved it and was one of the louder moments inside the stadium on Saturday. And that's just an indication of just how powerful music can be in terms of enhancing the game day operations.
I thought it was great. It was loud. It needs to be louder. I know I'll keep saying it needs to be louder. I need to be where I can't talk to somebody else next to me. And it was close to that. But it was wonderful. The music selection was good. Loved the timing of what they did. They can do more of that. I thought it was wonderful that they kept everybody engaged the entire time. So I give them a lot of credit for that. I loved how they timed everything to different pieces. You know, the "We Will Rock You" piece. We could hear a little Guns N' Roses if anybody's listening that does the music. Little Paradise Theater would be fine. I know this is old stuff. There's probably much younger stuff that you guys can mention. Taylor mentioned most of the good game day stuff. I would encourage people, definitely get in there early. Get there so you can hear the band. Get there so you're in the stadium. We're on national television almost every week. And so we're on national TV. One of the things we want recruits to see and we want everybody in the nation to see is a packed out Bridgeport Stadium. I want you to stay. I'm not going to chide people about it, but I think as we get, Alabama has the same problem. I mean, Nick Saban a couple years ago threatened to take away the students' tickets if they left. And basically said, if you scan out and you're leaving, then I'm going to make sure you don't get to come back the next week. So it's a problem everywhere. But I'd love for us to stay. The shout out to the Georgia Southern people last night. Those people stayed in the stadium the entire time. So it was impressive to see. And the App State people stay. The students stay the entire time, no matter what's going on in that game. So, just throwing out, not chiding anybody. So please don't think that. The other thing I want to throw out is that on Friday night, had tons of people come up, and even Saturday, to mention how much they like the podcast, how much they listen to it, which is wonderful. But also got a little intel about South Alabama and probably why they looked so sluggish yesterday. Their flight was 4 hours late, getting out of Mobile and getting into Charlottesville. So they stayed in Charlottesville. We got in yesterday at 10:15. We passed their buses on the way on 81. Now, I thought about slowing down and swerving like a cop would do on 81, but I didn't do that. They didn't get to the stadium till 10:40 or 10:45. They didn't come out to warm up until 11:20 or 11:25 and had to be ushered off so the parachute guys could come in. I think they got 15 minutes of warm up. So, they hit that game with not even being ready to do anything, and it looked like it in the very beginning. So I loved it, thought it was great. But that was my game day part, is I was so excited that the South Alabama people were all screwed up and bleary-eyed, and they were. Because for them, they were playing at 11 o'clock in the morning and still not ready. So I'll turn it over to Michael.
Yeah, well, real quick, I want to shout out to Brooke Boyd, who's one of our more active commenters across all of social media. Brooke saying, hey, get to your seats early. And the crowd in the third quarter seemed awfully quiet. I will say, I don't know if everybody else noticed what I did, but when our crowd gets into it, it is so obvious the difference it makes in terms of firing up our defense. I think it's a big factor in why in those moments at the end of the games, when even if it's a smaller version of Bridgeport, it seems to be the loudest version of us. The players feed off it, they react. So you do have an impact on the game no matter what people say. Another comment from Sydney. I posted entrance maps and concessions maps in the parents group last week and encouraged them to plan ahead. And I love that comment because it shows don't just rely on JMU to get this message out. We all play a role in the social media world of being able to help drive different behaviors and decisions inside the stadium. So definitely something where I think that's great that we're all encouraging our friends and family and coworkers and whoever goes to games to be engaged and to find new ways to get into the stadium. That'll make the experience better for all of us. We have a comment from Rusk. Yeah, crowd definitely dwindled after second half and mostly students. I will say this, it wasn't just students who left early. So there's been a lot of focus on students. There were some diehards, I'm not going to name names, that sit around us for legitimate reasons who did leave on Saturday. But there were some people who I think saw the score early in the second half and said, you know what, I'm going to go back to the tailgates. It's a work in progress. We can grow this. We can enhance it. But there's a lot to continue to build off of, and it's good to see that continued progression. But Michael, it was good to see you on our side of the stadium. Again, as I mentioned in our intro, the first time we've gotten to take a group photo at a game. We need to make that more of a regular occasion, but was awesome to be able to interact with so many former players. I know you were in section 109 with us. We had the Ravenels, we had Harry Ravenel, we had Jordan Brown, Sam Kidd, Percy, and a number of others who came up. And as Steve mentioned, not only said great things about the podcast, but just were clearly having an awesome day. Take us in through your Saturday on the, I don't know what you always call our side of the stadium, but what was life like in the air on our side as you joined us?
So I call it the new side. Still
new
to this
side,
day.
okay, that's it.
I know it's a decade later, but I still call it the new side. It was pretty fun. You know, it was a good time. The views were a little different, but it was a good party. But to kick things off, right? Shout out to I've had a number of people come up and say how much they listen to the podcast, how much they love their impact. So kudos to everyone who came up, to all of us, right? Like, you guys are what matter, and we love that we're making a positive impact across all of JMU Nation. But before I sound like a homer in terms of the atmosphere, I'll talk a little bit about some of the areas of improvement. Obviously, let's call it what it is. It was family weekend, right? My spot at the famous Convo lot was gone by 8 a.m. I should have gotten there earlier, I know, but there are people, families coming in from all over town that will never be at a JMU game again, and we get it, right? There might not be diehards like us. But I started walking to the stadium around 11 o'clock, and there were hundreds of folks still drinking, making burgers, like no one was packing up, right? The lack of urgency from the fan base, yes, mostly families, was definitely alarming, but it was an early game. How much do you want to fault them? It's really hard, right? That's one thing you can't really change. I'll say this, up until the fourth quarter, I would say the stadium was pretty decent, right? And it felt like it started to clear out right before USA or South Alabama just started chucking at the end of the game. All they could do was throw Hail Marys, and we'll talk about this a little bit later in the broadcast. So that was really tough, right? So there's obviously we want people to stay a long time, but it was a 3-score game. It was 31-10 with 9 minutes left. That being said, I don't think anyone's brought this up yet. Those TV timeouts in the second half were absolutely brutal. Call it what it is, right? I would like to say I'm a diehard of most diehards, but that was tough to sit through. It was 3-minute breaks after 3-minute breaks. I got bored. There was lack of rhythm on our side of the ball. The fact that our defense, and let's just call it our offense, even was able to get up and play after those timeouts and just the time in between, that was mentally taxing. And I'll give it yes, do I want the fans staying the whole time? But you can see it in their face. It was getting hot. Those breaks were super long. So those are my 3 to 4 areas of improvement. We'll get there. It's a cultural thing. I get it. That being said, this was my first home game back in a year. And I'll tell you what, that didn't feel like a JMU football game to me. That was a party. That didn't feel like your good old mom and dad's JMU. This was new age JMU. I love the hip hop. I love the house music. You had some trendy songs that I'm hearing on Instagram and TikTok all over the place. We talked about the Taylor Swift beat, which was awesome. So much room for fan engagement. I love that bit where it's if you're a guy, make some noise. If you're a woman, make some noise. If you're a parent, make some noise. That was super great. That being said, I need more pump it up, right? I need more swag surf. I need more rhyme dust. Lots of new aggressive, let's call it what it is, music being played at the stadium. We need more of it, but I loved it, right? It felt like a party atmosphere. I had so much fun. Even the people around me, people I've been tailgating with for the past decade, were this is different. This feels strange. Like, I'm having a really good time. Some people were like, this felt like the Louisville game last year. And that was a fun time. Like the DJ, everything, like atmosphere was awesome. Tons of stuff to talk about the in-game piece, but I feel like JMU football, at least from a home perspective, really turned the page this past weekend.
Yeah, and for me, this is a foundation. So the more success you have and the more the reaction is positive, the more you're going to see JMU lean into the things that people like. And I think that's why conversations like this, and we're so deliberate on this show of constantly coming back to the stadium in-game atmosphere, is so that JMU can hear this feedback in a very public way and a very positive way. And that's why if you're listening from JMU, I hope the overwhelming headline that you're getting from this podcast is, we hear what you're doing, we see what you're doing, and we love it. I love the drink vendors. I've never seen a drink vendor in the stands. That's why I tweeted from our Sound Off account to say, wow, this is awesome. And we're going to continue to recognize the good stuff that's happening. But I will say, for anybody who's listening who, go, why does the music matter? It matters because of the student reaction. And if you want to keep them in the stands and want to keep them engaged, play the music they like. And what I loved about it is it wasn't just songs in isolation. They were very good at putting them up on the video board. I even saw, I don't know if it was Devin or Brandon Ravenel, they were holding them up doing the Lion King and the reaction from that. It was such a good thing to see that type of feedback. And that's going to breed more success and breed more people wanting to stay involved. I still would like to see some things like we've seen at other stadiums where maybe you offer a lower beer price if you enter the stadium before kickoff, or there's 10% off concessions or something that gets people in. I'll leave that up to the financial backers, Jamie, to decide what can be done. But if you're not making that money, regardless if they're outside the stadium, so if there's a way to get them in and make it work for JMU and make it work for our coaching staff and fan base, I think it's something you should explore. Positive thing is I think they will explore it. But as always, thank you to the people who are commenting on this for sharing your perspective and sharing your feedback, because it helps us all as we grow. But with that, I think we will turn to the game on Saturday, and this will be our section, as we always call, Under Review. This is brought to you by the folks at Skyline Financial Partners. They are founded by multiple JMU alum. Skyline aims to build lasting, lifelong relationships with fellow Dukes fans with a unique team of licensed advisors on estate planning, attorney, and a CPA. The Skyline team is committed to prioritizing your family's needs through a personalized planning approach, and you can learn more at skylinefinancialpartners.com. So Taylor, turn to you. I know there's been a ton of talk about the secondary, and we have a conversation prior to coming on air where we've said one of the things we don't like that's happening on social media is there seems to be people really connecting what's happened in the last 3 games, and that if you really step back and look at it, each of those games is very unique in how the opponents made the score a little closer than we would like. You've been crunching some of the numbers from a stats side, looking at the secondary, and see what some of us are really seeing is that there really has been noticeable improvement as we've gone from the UVA game through what we saw yesterday against South Alabama.
Yeah, the point you made about the similarities where the last 4 games were all 1-score games at the end. They all had a component of where we either had to come back or the lead that we had or the momentum we had kind of was lost in the third quarter there. I think the more I started to kind of scrutinize the game and look at it, those were really the only similarities in the game itself, which they're big similarities. But, there's been a lot of focus, and I want to give credit to Eric Pitzer, who gave us the statistic right before we came on air. And these are just the stats. These are just the facts. We're number 1 in the country in our rush defense, and we're 131 out of 133 in our pass defense. On the surface, that looks like, only half of our defense is working right now. The more I looked at some of these numbers, I don't think that's the case. I think it's the type of defense we're running right now. And I think it's also the reason why we're still 5-0 against very good competition. So looking back at some of the numbers, the pass completions for these teams going from UVA, Troy, Utah State, South Alabama, teams are completing more passes, but the yards per pass is trending downward. So at UVA, they were getting about 19 yards per pass. At Troy, 13 yards per pass. At Utah State, 14 yards per pass. And yesterday, 10 yards per pass. So we're trending downward in the yards per pass that these teams are getting. The other thing that I thought was interesting was in the UVA game, 4 passes accounted for 61% of the yards. In the South Alabama game yesterday, 2 passes accounted for 34% of the yards. Utah State, 3 passes accounted for 58% of their yards. And at Troy, 3 passes accounted for about a quarter of their yards. So we're having these breakdowns in these 1, 2, or 3, or 4 big plays across the game. Those are the plays that are causing the swing and momentum that we're seeing so much. And when we're talking about, man, our secondary continues to get burned. I'm not a coach. The coaches on JMU staff might disagree with me, but here's my perspective on that. Our rush defense is dominating. I mean, we've held some of the best running backs in the nation statistically to 10, 20, 30 yards. These teams we've held in the negative or just above single digits in yardage. And we're having to sacrifice. I mean, we can't continue to do that and play a prevent defense in the secondary. So our linebackers, our D-line, and in some instances, our secondary is coming up and providing that coverage that's allowing us to have the best rush defense in the nation 5 weeks into the season. Also, our pass rush. I can't remember the statistics. I saw it yesterday, but something in terms of, I believe it was sacks and quarterback hurries. I think we're first in the nation. Don't quote me on that, but if we're not in first, we're in the top 10 right there in terms of that category. So what are we risking then? Well, then we're risking giving up some of these big plays sometimes. But when you look in the fact that 2, 3, or 4 plays are accounting for some of the most yardage of these of their pass offense in a game, then that means that 80, 90% of the time our secondary is doing the job. So all those plays, there's really 3 or 4 plays that are creating this large momentum swing. I can tell that our coaching staff is frustrated. We obviously want to crack down on that. But at the end of the day, the decisions that we're making with our defense and the risks that we're willing to take, which is some of those big plays, has gotten us to the point where we're still 5-0 against some very good teams. And as much as maybe in the moment I'm saying there's an issue, I don't really know if there is an issue at all with how we're running our defense, but obviously always room for improvement.
Well, a couple of points on that before we bring Michael in. Is remember, we lost Isaac Gukru to the transfer portal late in the process. That was another member of the defensive line. We also have an injury to Abi that impacted our depth. So our defensive line, which is a big component that all 3 of the defensive components, your defensive line, your linebackers, and your secondary, are all working together. So not being able to rotate as many of our defensive linemen into the game as we would typically have been able to in past seasons, as the game goes on, is going to impact the secondary because we're not getting the quarterback as quickly. The other factor is, and I think this is why Cignetti has been so deliberate in his post-game comments to mention that you cannot separate what happens in the defense from what happens on the offensive side of the football. And Michael, that's where I want to bring you in on some comments from Curt Cignetti yesterday in the post-game talking about we're leaving a lot of plays out there on the field at the quarterback position, where and his frustration with another game where we did not see any points scored in the third quarter. 2 for 14 on third down. When you're having that happen, your defense is going to be on the field for a lot longer. They're going to get fatigue, start to come in. But as you mentioned, as we were having the conversation before the broadcast, that also means their quarterback is throwing a lot more. And that leads to more opportunities to make mistakes. Just curious of what you saw from the offense being connected to the defensive side in terms of what's maybe leading to these games not being the separation and score that we'd all like to see.
Yeah, no doubt. And by the way, shout out to Taylor. Like every broadcast, he keeps pulling out like these amazing stats that I'm just like, man, why didn't I think about that? So
he's our Tim Russell. We need him to get a whiteboard so he can whiteboard it. Like I'm a Meet the Press guy, so the whiteboard. Oh, there you go. Your sound off, Pat.
Absolutely. Offense wise, like I think the frustrating part, right? And Cignetti's brought about it now, maybe the last 3 or 4 weeks. I think from the quarterback position, we're missing out on some routine plays, right? And I'm not talking about 50-yard bombs down the field or explosive plays. So I think we get some of that. It's the 4-yard play that puts you in 2nd and 6, right? Versus 2nd and 12, right? Or like instead of having a 3rd and 9 situation, you're in 3rd and 2. And I think those are the nuances from this offense that is going to make us really get to that next level and be truly a dominant team. And I'm going to try to talk about this without being a homer. And I'll be honest, I'll try to take some of the emotion out of it. Do I want us to finish a game? Yes. Do I want to stomp on them and come out with a 3 or 4 score win? Yes. I would love that. We would all love that. But the philosophy of our defense right now is good luck, make the freaking play. And you saw that. And to your point, Carr Bradley had to throw 50 times to, I think, get 302 yards passing. He was like 28 for 50. He was under 50% until I believe the third quarter. This was by far the best game of the season by the entire JMU football team. We absolutely dominated in the line of scrimmage. I think, Taylor, you brought about it. Like the defense, the entire time, if you ever watch this game, the replays on YouTube, this defense plays with such great leverage. And what I mean there is no one is overrunning the play. They make this wall. If you watch how they move, no one is moving too fast or being too overly aggressive. They're always in the right place. And they're playing with great leverage. They're keeping everyone inside of them. And the entire defense moves as one. You don't see anyone being too excited or too overactive or overrunning the play. They all move together. It's amazing, right? Like I love it. They're a joy to watch. And at the end of the game, until about 8 minutes left in the fourth quarter, when everything was clearing out, it was 31-10. Nothing was working for South Alabama. All they had was a Hail Mary. If you look at the throws they were making, Carter Bradley was getting destroyed left and right on the field. And kudos to him. He stood in the pocket. He was limping around. He was making plays. But all they had was chuck it. They could only chuck the ball, hope to get a PI, get down the field. With Damian Webb, 5'8", 215-pound running back, ran for 151 yards versus Oklahoma State. I think he finished the game with 32 yards rushing, and he was one of the top players coming into the Sun Belt this past year. It was amazing. That being said, right, like this, I'm going to sound like a broken record. We're far from playing a grade, an A-plus game. I don't think we'll ever do it, but we're 5-0. Offense, particularly in the quarterback position, and I'm sure there's some play on the offensive line that needs to get improved, left a number of plays on the field. We're 50, those PI penalties at the end of the game, some of them look great, but then at the end of the day, they happen, right? We're 50-50 on those balls. The pass game's improving. I mentioned we're punishing the quarterback. I think we're number one in the country in rush defense and also number one in sacks per game, and I believe in tackles for loss. That's ridiculous. So a lot to chime on about, but taking the emotion out of the game, the recency factor, looking back at it, that was a dominant performance against probably the team that I was most worried about because I don't know anything about South Alabama. I know Kane Womack talks a lot. They're a very confident team. They feel very good about their program. I think they were picked to win the West outside of Troy. I had no idea. I thought we were going to face a gauntlet, and we physically dominated them the entire game. So loved it. Come out and support. I'm jazzed up. I'm hyped up. Good game.
A South Alabama team that, yes, lost to a MAC team, but also went on the road and beat Oklahoma State. In
33-7.
Last time I checked, that's a Power 5 team with a lot of resources that's no small victory that we should not gloss over, which I think a lot of times we do. Another comment in the chat. I think the last 3 games have ended in interceptions, so definitely forcing the opponent's quarterback to make mistakes. I think that's a great segue to bringing in Steve because there were some performances yesterday on defense that I really wanted to highlight. Jalen Green, again, finding ways to just be an absolute menace on the defensive line, having those 2.5 sacks, but that interception return for a touchdown, that's another Mickeyism. Mickey says when you score a touchdown on defense, you're going to win most games. But being so close to 109, seeing the reaction that Jalen Green got when he returned to the sideline, just such an incredible impact in terms of the energy on that sideline. But the man on those final drives gets to the quarterback again, causing havoc. Just another great performance. Aiden Fisher, I don't know how many times we can praise him on this podcast, but it's probably not enough. The work that he has done coming in to really step in for what Cignetti has called 2 of the top 10 players on this team in Torres Jones and Jalen Walker. And we haven't skipped a beat at linebacker. I think Cignetti said in his postgame he believes he's the number 1 linebacker right now in terms of his play in the Sun Belt. And then Francis Meehan coming back from what looked like it was going to be an injury in the fourth quarter that might have kept him out for the game to get that game sealing interception. Just throws another 3 players on defense who are just doing awesome things for this unit. Steve, you have the benefit of being able to go down to the sidelines. Maybe talk about your perspective on those players and some of the others who really stepped up on the defensive side of the ball yesterday to help us get this win.
Yeah, happy to. And you also want to just, bring up what we talked about, or what I talked about last week was JMU 316. And we did whip their ass. And when you go back and watch the replay, now yesterday when you're sitting in the stands, you're going to be like, oh my God, here we go. I didn't have that feeling yesterday. And it's not a homer feeling. It's just, I didn't have it. And when I went back and watched the game today again, oh my God, these guys, they beat people up on defense. And there's an old wrestler, and you guys, the old people on here will remember him. His name's Ray the Crippler Stevens. And he used to say, I like to hurt people. This defense loves to crush you. and you could see it in their faces. When I was down there on the second quarter, the look on the South Alabama guys' faces were like, when can we get out of here? I want to go home. And they were tapping out in the second quarter. Now, I give them credit. Halftime adjustments, they all make them. They're a good team. They're a solid squad. You don't go into Oklahoma State and win like they do. But they didn't know what to do because their head coach is like, we will establish the run. That's what he said all week long. You didn't establish anything. You came in and you got crushed. And every team, Georgia Southern, when you come in, you're going to get crushed. I'm just telling you right now. Mr. Bren, you think you're going to run around and did like you did for Coastal? That ain't happening. You'll be getting up limping. So the reason I like the way the defensive line is playing, the way the whole defense is playing is for that reason. They are junkyard dogs. And if nobody else takes that moniker on, I'm going to continue to preach it because that's who they are. Love the overall performance of the defense. I want to give shout outs to, a bunch of the younger guys. The other thing we haven't even talked about, and I'll just throw this out because we have a bunch more to talk about. Nobody has mentioned our long snapper. That guy's doing an unbelievable job. And I got his name down here. I want to make sure I get it right. Caden Schickel, if I say it right. I hope I didn't butcher your name. That is a hard job. And I know we don't get too deep into what you do, but to do the long snap the right way and to make sure you get it to the punter and you make sure you get it to the holder on a kickoff is unbelievable on an extra point. He hasn't missed a beat at all. And we had an all-world long snapper for, I think, 15 years. I think that's how long Kyle was here. But I'm telling you, you see the exchange with those players, we don't miss anything. And our punter is outstanding. I mean, oh my God, we're pinning people down. And, you just don't have anywhere to go in our stadium. You come into play here, we are going to beat your ass every week up and down that field. So I know I've said ass twice, so I should probably turn it over to somebody else.
Well, on that point, just to mention the punter, 41.9 average from Ryan Hansen yesterday, put people twice inside the 20 again, but there's a smoothness to his game that I really like, especially, I don't know if many fans caught it, but going into this week, that was a mention from Cignetti is that South Alabama had a very active punt rush, and he was concerned about their ability to potentially block a kick. There were some times where they came after him, but I thought Hansen's poise and kind of leadership from that position, I've never been concerned about him having to punt from deep in our zone because he's going to flip the field. Really impressed with him. Again, Camden Wise is making his field goals and he's making his extra point. How big was the missed extra point from South Alabama in that game? Keeping it to a 2-score game or at least a touchdown, them having to get a 2-point conversion. I think that changes the dynamic and the feel in games. So I remember there were a lot of people calling and saying negative things last year about Camden Wise. Man, has he grown into this role and is as solid as ever. And those points matter in these close games. So really, really impressed with him. Segueing, though, to the offensive side of the football, and we haven't talked yet about the big day from the Botetourt prospect, Zach Horton. Taylor, I know you're somebody who takes a lot of pride in the Botetourt area because it's where you call home. You were right there with me as we saw Horton come down the sideline on his big touchdown that was such a big moment in the game. Many guys might come out of bounds or get brought down, but he lowered the shoulder and just ran over the guy from South Alabama. Let's talk about his big day from Zach Horton. 3 for 116. I noticed in the post game that Cignetti said there is not a player on this team working harder than Zach Horton. It's not just his ability to catch the ball; it's what he does from a blocking perspective. But your thoughts on the Botetourt prospect?
When he was going down the sideline, I was screaming, "Botetourt! Botetourt!" as loud as I could. I was going crazy. It was one of the more impressive plays I think I've ever seen live. How he just full control, full confidence, just ran right over that guy. And, I don't know if anyone knows why my handle is Duke of Botetourt. I don't know if anyone knows what Botetourt is. If you don't, you should. So I'm going to give you a quick little history lesson on Botetourt County. We are down here in Southwest Virginia. The county boundaries at one time went all the way to the Mississippi, and they included all of present-day Kentucky, West Virginia, portions of Indiana, Illinois, and even the southwest corner of Wisconsin. So if you've ever lived in or traveled in those areas, you have been in part of what is considered historic Botetourt County. We are also the headwaters of the James River, and we are also home to the Triple Crown of the Appalachian Trail, which is the most photographed section of the Appalachian Trail. So Botetourt County is where it's at. And not only do we have all those accolades, but we are home to one Zach Horton, product of Lord Botetourt High School. I know if you go on the website, his hometown says Roanoke, Virginia, which I can only assume is because there is a portion of Botetourt County where their postal code and their postal address is Roanoke, Virginia. But make no mistake about it, Zach Horton is a product of Botetourt County, Virginia. And as long as he is on this team, I will cede my crown as the Duke of Botetourt to Zach Horton, and I will gladly take Deputy Duke of Botetourt, and we'll retake that crown once he graduates.
And Taylor, if I may, he was not the only Botetourt prospect this week that had a big week for JMU. I saw Shane Metlin's tweet yesterday talking about Meet Veltman, who had 25 kills and 26 digs for JMU volleyball in their 2 wins versus Texas State. So Botetourt putting itself on the map. I feel like we're the tourism bureau now for your great area. And based on the bear that's chasing you and all the other nature, if you're somebody who likes the outdoors, lots to do in Botetourt. So
let me just say, all we know how to do in Botetourt is win. And I will give a shout out to Lord Botetourt High School, who defeated Appomattox yesterday, or I believe Friday. I'm getting the dates confused, but the papers are saying it was Appomattox' worst loss since 1865. And I'm not talking about high school football. So I'll leave it at that for you historical junkies out there to catch that reference.
Awesome. Michael, want to bring you in on another player on offense who is really emerging, and that's Surratt at wide receiver. Signetti mentioning again in the postgame that he is a gamer who's coming up in a big way for this offense. Just curious what you saw from him on Saturday. I think his route running has really impressed me. He's a larger wide receiver that offers a good target, had the 5 catches for 95 yards and a score. What are you seeing from Surratt at the wide receiver position, and why is it so important maybe when some other wide receivers who we were thinking would kind of lead this team might not be getting the numbers that some of us expected in the preseason?
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head. Elijah Surratt, 6'2", 210, right? Really big target. But what I love about him so far, he plays with a certain aggression to him. If you watch him catch some of those first downs or even on the double move, he attacks the ball. Like, he doesn't wait for the ball to get there. He goes up and grabs it. You watched Utah State, and I think in the third quarter, all the momentum was on the Aggies, and he had a crucial first down catch, and he went back to the ball and snagged away from the defender, right? Like, he's aggressive. To your point, Signetti said he's a gamer. And I'm not sure how he ended up at St. Francis last year, but I'm glad he's with us now. And I think also, like, he gives us a bit, the size advantage against some of these corners, I think, is a big piece. And as Jordan McLeod continues to mature during the year, I think that chemistry is going to continue growing and growing. Quick question, Taylor, do we consider that Roanoke, or do you separate the two? Like, what are your thoughts?
It is the Roanoke metro area. So I'm sure there's a lot of Botetourt folks that say they're from Roanoke, but I just want to make it very clear that Botetourt County is its own thing, and there's a lot of pride in Botetourt County.
I just want to say this because this man needs no introduction, but James Carpenter is from Roanoke. And I will say this. I would say maybe 10 years ago, you probably couldn't recruit anyone outside of Southwest Virginia because of a certain university that's there. And the fact that we have Roanoke representing and Botetourt, James Carpenter, shout out to him again. Absolute warrior on Saturday. Was all over the field, making plays, chasing running backs, chasing receivers, hitting the quarterback. If you watch the Utah State game, he was down a lot. He had a tough game in a good way, but he was getting beat up, and he came back and just dominated the line of scrimmage. So just shout out to James Carpenter again. If you ever seen him, tell him good game. He deserves it.
I was going to say on James Carpenter, though, it's not just what he's doing on the line of scrimmage. How many times on the replay, if you look back at the game, is he 10 yards downfield making a play? It's just his ability to not give up on the play and to stay involved in the game is such a difference maker for this defensive line and this entire defensive unit. And just, again, coming back to that energy piece, what him and his teammates on that defensive line do for this unit on a day in and day out, again, being put in some tough situations and not having as much of an opportunity to rotate off and be able to continue to play at that high level is such a big factor in why this unit has been as successful as they are, and why this unit consistently finds another gear, though, when it matters. And I think that is something that deserves extra credit in terms of acknowledgement from podcasts and media like us, is that when their backs are against the wall, as tired as they are, they find a way to make those plays. against UVA. We saw it against Utah State. We saw it yesterday. They come up with a big sack on that last drive that forces that team to go even further than they would like to in with a tight time window with no timeouts. That's a huge factor and really impacts the play calling and allows our secondary to play a little further off, which leads to those interceptions because they're still getting pressure on the quarterback. So really, really, really pleased with that unit. Another comment, watching the game made me feel for the first time this season like old school JMU game. I'm a 21 graduate and felt like watching the game from 2017 to 2019. This bye will help us against Marshall. And I actually think the tie-in about the bye, I thought one of Cignetti's more interesting comments from the news press conferences afterwards is you could see how tired this group was. He said everyone involved in this organization needs the day off. Steve, you have an opportunity in your role with the Alpha Dogs and with the collective to know these players. I'm curious from what you took from that comment, because one thing that I think maybe even fans and media didn't focus enough on the preseason, just how grueling of a stretch this was. And we can't, on one hand, give credit for JMU being able to overcome all of these road trips, coming back on the road and having to play a South Alabama team, and then not acknowledge that strain and that stress that puts on not only the players, but again, the trainers, the support staff, the coaching staff that comes off the road, as Cignetti said, getting in at 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning, and then you're back in the office 2 or 3 hours later to start doing film and to start breaking down and having meetings. It's a real factor that this comes at such a great time, especially to be able to maybe get some players back from injury, possibly having a healthy Jalen Walker back and some other players start to come in as we face another stretch of games against a team in Georgia Southern and then a short week against Marshall. I'm just curious what you took from those comments.
Yeah, I mean they work all the time. It's I know even back when Mickey was doing it, they were cutting up film on the bus ride back from wherever they were coming from. I'm sure now it's even more technical and they probably can get film cut really quickly. I know it's not cutting film, it's digital, but at the end of the day, I know that, Coach Cignetti watches film at home for fun. So I know that's part of what he does. And I was glad to hear him say he was going to take today off. I hope he did, because they need to recharge. It is a long slog. And I can tell you, just as fans that went, I was worn out and I didn't do anything except, cheer. And, it's tiring going to Troy. Going to UVA wasn't tiring. That's not a big deal. But going to Troy, coming back early in the morning, they have to fly to Utah. And it's hard to play out there. The elevation does get to you. And at the end of the day, these guys work relentlessly. I mean, the players do, the coaches do. This is a very over-prepared team. You may beat us sometime this year. I don't know if you will or you won't. I'm starting to think that this team is going to get undefeated rings, and that's probably the homer in me. But if I were really to be pressed on it, I think we'll be 10-2. But I'm starting to think we may be 12-0. These guys work harder than anybody I've seen in a long time. Players, trainers, staff, you name them on that team, they work their rear ends off all the time. I was standing with a young woman at the Troy game on the sideline when Jordan Ray and I were over there. She was at Troy doing her graduate work, and she was telling me as a trainer that she did the Friday night game 3 hours away as a trainer, had to be in at Troy at 11 in the morning for a 6 p.m. game to do taping and massage and all the work they do as trainers. And she said, I'll get home tonight at like 2 in the morning. And, that's at Troy. Now, I'm sure they work just as hard. I'm not saying that they don't work as hard as we do, but can almost tell you JMU outworks everybody. You're never going to outwork JMU. You may beat us, but you're not going to outwork us. So I just wanted to, at least give you that insight that these guys are working all the freaking time, and it's appreciated. The fact that we're 5-0 is unbelievable in that stretch. Every other team that's got 3 games that they're playing in a row, if you look at the schedule for the Sun Belt, there are some more. They all have buys, or they have mini buys worked in. You'll look at the schedule, you'll see Coastal and App State playing, I think, October 10th on a Tuesday night. I think they have like time before and time after off. We didn't have any of that. And that's fine if that's what you want to do to us. We don't care. We're just going to win. That's what we do.
Yeah, and of note, I thought one other interesting quirk of the schedule is that Georgia Southern also comes into this game against JMU on a bye, which is not something you typically see. You see in many of these situations when a team like JMU goes with a bye week, that's an advantage that they can take into that game is to say, hey, they get to rest up while the other team is playing a game. That's not what we get. And I don't know if the transition is a factor in our schedule making this year, but they did us no favors in terms of giving us anything that we could really hang our hat on, other than, I will say, of note in these last couple of wins, we now beat the top 2 projected teams to the western part of the Sun Belt, beating Troy, beating South Alabama. These are not such programs. And it comes back to maybe the idea that all of us have not fully shifted from the mindset of the CAA. We're not playing Richmond anymore. We're not playing Delaware and Villanova. These are programs that are recording P5 wins, are giving fits to other programs in the AAC and Conference USA and across the country. These are not slouch programs who have a lot more benefits in terms of their ability to recruit for FBS for longer than JMU has. And we're winning these games, and we haven't looked at a place. And I keep going back to our conversations from last year's. What did we want to see from this team? Many of us were going to be happy if we just looked like we belong. And now we're beating the teams that are projected to be the top teams in the West on a regular basis, and continuing to find ways to get national attention. I thought it was great that Chris Vanini not only did a story this week on JMU and our success with the transition, but again during the game, he is highlighting the fact that JMU is moving to 5-0 and really having their way in the Sun Belt. That is going to pay huge dividends for this program in terms of recruiting. And again, that national brand. For those of you who follow Barstool, seeing PFT commenter now has on his Twitter bio his name, and then it says JMU 5-0. These types of things where you're featured with your logo and brand next to these other powerhouse programs. Maybe somebody could check me on this. I don't know how many are left unbeaten in the country, but the number keeps shrinking. And when there's a bye week, we're going to be undefeated for at least another week. And that matters in terms of that College Game Day and others who continue. I think the ESPN Final College Show gave us a sticker again this week. The mentions are happening, and they're happening more regularly. Did want to mention some other things that happened around the Sun Belt this week. There were some really interesting games. Marshall remains the only other Sun Belt team undefeated. They were given more of a game than people expected, probably by ODU, a 41-35 final there. That went back and forth. But ODU showing that, again, there are no slouches in this conference, as every team is a team that can really be beaten every one of these games. But then you look at the game that really I was very focused on, that Georgia Southern Coastal Carolina game, 38-28. For all the preseason talk about what we would see from Coastal Carolina's offense, that does not look like a unit that is as polished or as a well-oiled machine as we've seen in the past. Those are opponents we're going to see down the road. Georgia Southern, I know, Steve, I want to get your comments on what you saw in that game, because I know you focused on them. Definitely a team that's not afraid to throw it 50, 60 times. Probably a preview of some things we're going to see. And then the other game I was really intrigued by was Troy and Georgia State. There have been all the conversation. Georgia State comes into the game undefeated. They lose at home to Troy 28-7. And then maybe my final comment from around the conference, App State 41, UL Monroe 40 on a game that took a 54-yard field goal at the end to win it for App State, but just shows a lot of predictability in terms of these games week in and week out in the Sun Belt. Taylor, just your thoughts on what we're seeing, some of the storylines maybe conference-wide, but then focusing in on the JMU role in terms of where we stand through 5 weeks.
Well, real quick on that App State Louisiana Monroe game, shout out to John Butler, who texted me and had me tune in at the end there. Louisiana Monroe was inside the 5-yard line on 4th down and opted to run a play to try and score a touchdown instead of kick a field goal. So that's why App State was even in a position to win the game on a field goal by 1 point. So was kind of surprised by that. I saw someone today, I don't remember what account it was, but the Texas State, Louisiana game got picked up on national TV, ESPNU. I think that's awesome. It's great for the brand. I did see someone say, it's clear that these are the 2 best teams in the West. And I'll eat some crow on this, because a couple of weeks ago I said I didn't think Troy was that good. I still think Troy, well, let me back up. I think Troy today, after some of the results I've seen the last 2 weeks, beating the preseason #1 in Conference USA, and then also ending Georgia State's undefeated streak, I think Troy is still one of the top 2 teams in the West. I think South Alabama is still one of the top 2 teams in the West. So I'm not purposely trying to disrespect Louisiana or Texas State, especially love the guys over Louisiana State. Over at Louisiana and Texas State. Love the guys over there that run their social media accounts. But I still think Troy and South Alabama are the 2 top teams in the West, and we've beaten them. I also think it's really interesting that we've been on national TV 3 of the first 5 weeks of the season. Obviously, we all know the Marshall game will be nationally televised, so there's a 4th game. We'll find out tomorrow, the kickoff time and everything for it's tomorrow. Yes, tomorrow for Georgia Southern. And if that game has an opportunity to be picked up, I mean, Georgia Southern is they're 4-1, and their only loss is to a good Wisconsin team. That Wisconsin team's only loss is to an undefeated Washington State team. So this is a good Georgia Southern team, and I thought it was funny that Kurt Signetti responded to one of the tweets about us being 5-0 with saying, "Well, I just hope that the game 6 is the same thing doesn't happen as last year," which, as we all know, Georgia Southern was sitting in a position to play spoiler again. So this game coming up with Georgia Southern, there's the revenge factor. I do have a lot of respect historically for that program and what they've meant to college football, especially at this level. So I think it's an exciting opponent. I think people need to come out to Bridgeforth Stadium and watch a really good football team. They're in a position to play spoiler again. They're in a position to play spoiler at our house. And I mean, there's not a team other than maybe App State and UVA that I was looking forward to getting a chance to match up and go head to head and give them our best shot. So a lot of storylines in the Sun Belt coming in with Georgia Southern. And, on the horizon there, we have that Marshall matchup, which they have NC State and Georgia State coming up. So you have to think if Marshall continues to win out and if we were able to beat Georgia Southern, that you could potentially have 2 ranked teams playing each other in Huntington, West Virginia in a few weeks.
And on that Georgia Southern note, now that we hold our phones up, because that's becoming a thing for JMU, want to point out that JMU Sports put out that there is a flash sale for tickets that's going on for the next 72 hours. You can get $25 tickets to the October 14th game. So if you're somebody out there that says, I didn't realize this was as big of a matchup and you don't have your tickets yet, jmusports.com, you could pick up a $25 ticket. And let's, I know Clay Helton really made a big effort this week of calling out their fan base and saying, let's make sure that their stadium was packed and they delivered. Let's do the same. Let's make sure that there's a big crowd in Harrisonburg for what's going to be one of the tougher tasks of the season for this unit. Michael, your storyline's going into the bye week. There's a lot of different things. Obviously, there's some recruiting opportunities now for our staff. We'll hit the road, going to programs, meeting with some of those high school recruits. There's the need to rest up some players who are clearly dealing with some injuries as we get to this point of the season. Of note, remember, this is being our second year at FBS. We're not going to have 2 bye weeks this year. We're only going to have 1. What are you looking at as we go into the bye, and what are maybe some of your priorities you'd like to see from this team as we get set for not only the Georgia Southern match, but again, that upcoming game against Marshall, which is going to be on a short week?
Yeah, no doubt. I think number one, I'll remind people of this. I was lucky enough to go to Statesboro last year to the Georgia Southern JMU game. They rushed the field on us. I know we were ranked number 25, but I just want people to know like the gravity of this game and how important it is that you come out and support and how much this team needs you and how much they deserve your support as well. Georgia Southern rushed the field. That was a big game for them, right? Our first year in FBS, and they felt the need that was a major matchup. And Taylor hit on the head. Great history behind that program. They were dominant FCS for years and years. Lots of history, and they're going to bring their fans. They're going to bring them. They're going to be loud. So we've got 2 weeks to prepare. So do what you need to do. Cancel those wedding plans, cancel vacation or whatever you have, like be at Bridgeforth on the 14th. Regarding the bye week, I mean, no surprises here, but I want to take us back to, I think it was 2020. It was the COVID year. And Cole Johnson just took over. And you might remember we had Ben DiNucci for the last 2 years, and we ran a very effective and dangerous RPO offense, which relied on DiNucci's legs, being able to get outside the pocket. And as we know now, Cole Johnson becoming probably statistically the best quarterback in JMU history, that probably wasn't his strong point. And it was all about adjustments on the fly. Like we shifted to more of a pro style spread out offense, leveraging Cole Johnson's strengths. And I believe this bye week, we're going to reassess a few things, right? We're going to look at what Jordan McLeod does well, what he doesn't do well. We're going to look at what Kalon does well and what he doesn't do well, what the offensive line looks like without Kidwell. Like, what can we do better on that front? And particularly on defense, right? We've got a number of folks coming back. Like, what do we do now with number 11 now that TJ and Jay Walker are coming back? What are we going to do there? And how do we alter and maybe take advantage of, we have 6 to 7 really good defensive linemen. I mean, do we do like more of a 3-3 front, put another linebacker on the field for both coverage and maybe blitz them off the edge? maybe that's a nice little wrinkle for us, and maybe rest a couple of defensive linemen here and there. There's a lot that I think we can do. But I want to remind people, we've got a lot of football left. We've got Old Dominion at home, App State at home, and then we just talked about it, Georgia Southern at home as well, and UConn. Huge games. UConn just lost by 1 point, by the way, to Utah State last week as well. That was a nail biter. But as much as like we're 5-0 and I love it, I'm going to preach it till the roosters come home, till the chickens come home. But we've got so much football left, and we've got a lot of support. But I think this week is all about resting up, reassessing, look at who we are, and really maximizing the talent and putting our folks in even better positions going forward.
Awesome comments. And I'll note, I think you had in front of you, Michael, to go back to that Utah State UConn game. I believe the Utah State receiver that made some problems for us had a really big game yesterday too. I know you were mentioned. Do you have that stat in front of you? Or if not, that's just a note. I keep looking back at some of our previous opponents to see what they do in their follow-up games. So it just noting that JMU's secondary was not the only group that struggled with the receiving corps from Utah State. So
yeah, I think he had it was number 8 or number 0, but I believe he had over
200 yards receiving. Yeah.
200 yards receiving. Unreal. Pretty
big day. So just note that there are other teams that are, and he got a helmet sticker last night, I know, on ESPN too. So Steve, I want to bring you in for your priorities going into the bye week. A lot of different ways we could take it, but what are you looking at to see from this group, and or anything that's been mentioned by Kurt Cignetti and his comments leading into the bye?
Yeah, I want to shout out Jake Longnecker and the marketing team. They're the ones that are responsible for the music yesterday, the graphics. Give them a follow. They did an outstanding job, and they'll continue to tweak that and make that good. So I wanted to put that out there first. The other part I want to respond to is Michael saying that they'll bring their fans. The Georgia Southern fans you will not hear from. They are stuck in the right-hand corner of our stadium behind the Jumbotron. And so my hope is, like we didn't hear from the South Alabama fans yesterday, we won't hear from them either. But they'll travel well. I've already heard from an acquaintance I made down there in the grocery store last year. We went to the grocery store in Statesboro. I ran into a guy that was shopping that invited us to a tailgate, and I gave him my business card, and he's already hit me up and said, "Hey, we're coming up. We love to see you guys." And I said, "Sure, love to have you at the tailgate. Looking forward to seeing you as well." So nice folks, and Michael's right. That was a huge game for them to knock off a ranked opponent. And this is a huge game for us. And it's a revenge game. And I can see us spending a big chunk of this bye week working on a number of things as a team. We're leaving a lot of plays on the field, not being ugly about any of what we're doing. But when you go back and rewatch it, there's a lot of times we can be pulling that ball and running. They're open receivers that you can get those 4, 5, 6 yard pieces to. This is a lot like tennis, and I'll give you a little tennis analogy. I play a little bit every week. You can slam the ball down the alley when you're playing doubles. It's a 20% shot that you're going to make it. Or you can hit it at moderate speed down the middle and win a point every time. And the ones that hit it down the middle and win a point every time are the ones that win matches, not the people that go down that alley and try to do that work. So at the end of the day, that goes to Michael's chunk plays that South Alabama was making. You'll get 1 or 2 of those. You're not going to win a game doing that. We'll give up some of those, but I think we're going to work on a number of things this week. I think we'll tweak a number of pieces that we're seeing. Remember, Jordan has played 4 games in 2 years. Nobody's, we got to keep remembering who, he's doing a wonderful job. 4 games in 2 years. He'll be going into, he's played, I guess this is 5th, but he played 4.5. So I'll give you the half of the Bucknell game. As he rolls into getting a bye week, getting some more work, and we roll into Georgia Southern. Again, it's the biggest game of the year. Every one of these will be, but we've got 4 home games and only 3 away. We're only going on the road once in October, and then we get a mini bye. So we'll play at Marshall on a Thursday and get a bye again. We don't go on the road again until the first week in November, and we go to Atlanta. Not a tough trip in terms of travel. I'm sure those folks will be good. They'll be ready. But again, nobody goes to that stadium, and they don't go to those games. So I'm hoping a bunch of JMU people go, and then we got Coastal. So, love the graphic you put up a minute ago that showed Coastal last. I'm not going to say they're done because they could rally, but with 3 losses and 2 in the division, not looking good for the Coastal folks. And that's really sad. That really makes me sad. Does not make me sad. They can lose every game on their schedule and would make me extremely happy. That's the only fan base I will never root for, ever, on anything they're doing. Never going to happen. Don't care that you're in the Sun Belt. We'll never root for you. So continue to lose because you deserve to lose.
There you go. That's not your wrestling comment. That still is your final thoughts when we get to you at the end. But Taylor, wanted to bring you in just for your final thoughts. One thing I'm just curious from the bye week, I didn't get to see what my storyline would be, is do we find a way to get Alonzo Barnett back in possibly into some game action in the coming weeks, particularly if we see moments in the game where the offense is installing? That's not starting a quarterback controversy, not taking anything away from what Jordan's do, but is there a moment where maybe it's a goal line situations, or is there another time where we see Alonzo get another crack at it? It's something I'm intrigued by as we go into the bye week, because it's been a storyline that's been put out there. But Taylor, from you, your final thoughts as we end this podcast and go into a bye week. We do have an exciting bye week show that we'll talk about at the end of this broadcast, some guests we're going to have on for next week. But your final thoughts on anything related to what we've talked about earlier, or what you're looking for going forward.
I have 2 quick points and an invitation I'm going to make. One, Chauncey Logan, Salem, Virginia, just outside of Roanoke. So we got another Southwest Virginia guy on there. I just want to make sure he didn't get left out of the Carpenter and Horton party. Number 2, I asked this question on Twitter. I'm still looking for the Conference USA scores from Saturday. It was a college football Saturday. I could not find any Conference USA football scores. So if someone can help me find those, please send them my way. And the last invitation I'm going to make is this. We had a QB battle going into the season. We had a 3-game road trip. We had 4 games after Bucknell against teams that we had no recent history against, nothing to really prep for. We were playing a P5 school that hadn't played us in 40 years. We were playing the 2022 Sun Belt champion, the 2021 Mountain West champion, and a South Alabama team that beat Oklahoma State by 26 points. If there is anyone listening to this podcast or anyone listening to this podcast that knows somebody that says, I confidently thought we were going to be 5-0 at this point, this is my invitation to you. We would like to have you on during the bye week episode to come on, and I'd love to hear your justification for how you actually thought we'd be 5-0 at this point. And so I bring that point to say, I don't think anyone thought that we would, and it wasn't because we doubted this team. It was any team put in this position with those statistics I just read off. 5-0 would be a miraculous feat. So for all the concerns that we have in our pass game, for the concerns of some of the close games that we've had that we think shouldn't have been close, we are 5-0 in a position that few teams in this country would be 5-0. It's something to be celebrated. It's something to enjoy. And as I tweeted out earlier today, we are 5-0 for the second year in a row. Our second year as an FBS school. Enjoy it. Give often to the JMU Duke Club and Mount Pelier Collective. Get to the game early, stay late, and go Dukes.
Awesome. Michael, your final thoughts.
Love that, Taylor. I'm hyped. I'm ready to go. I wish Georgia Southern was this weekend. Where'd I go? Big last thoughts is like, let's talk tactical here. At the end of the day, right, we've talked about all these plays that this team's left on the field. And if we look at what Todd and Teo did so well last year, or the offense in general, is they took the play in front of them. And I think if this team does that, right, whether it's the 3-yard run, the 4-yard bubble screen, right, the 2-yard hitch that gets them into 3rd and short, the potential of this team is there is none, right? Or there is no ceiling for it. So I think that's where I look at it, right? Like I can't wait for the adjustments. I'm excited for the potential, but as long as this team just takes the play and the defense just keeps coming out with their heads on fire like they're going, sky's the limit.
Steve Brown, the floor is yours.
Georgia Southern, you listen and you listen good. Saturday night, October 14th, you're going to be playing in a sold-out Bridgeforth Stadium with a 5-0 JMU team. We'll walk that aisle. We know without a doubt who we are, and that we're the very best team in the Sun Belt. And you got to walk the other aisle, and you know deep in your gut that you're not. We're going to take it to you for 4 solid quarters. You come, you strap it up, because we're not going to let you tap out even when you do. 60 solid minutes. You can tap out all you want. We're going to keep bringing it. So you think real long and hard during this bye week. And that little nugget in your stomach that hurts, that's us. And it's only going to get worse as it gets close. Bring it. Hail Southern.
And before we go, look at that picture. Just remarkable for those on the video feed. For those who are just listening to the audio version, check out our Sound Off Twitter account. You can see the unbelievable cape that Alice Brown is making for Steve, that I cannot wait for it to make its first appearance at Bridgeport Stadium. Steve, do you think it makes it to the Georgia Southern game? Is Alice in the background? Is that the day that it makes its debut?
Oh, that's the day. You will see that cape, and I'll have a crown on, and you won't miss it. I will not wear it on the sidelines because it's a distraction, but I will have it up in the stands, and I'll rub it in any of their faces I see. So bring it on, Georgians, Georgia Southern. It'll be in the tailgates. It'll be in the stands. I will wear that thing the entire game.
And as I said, you're a national treasure, and we must protect you at all costs. So, as always, gentlemen, the three of you, we appreciate your efforts. I want to give a shout out to Chandler Fortune behind the podcast tonight, doing a great job producing, putting up all our graphics and videos and stuff. Chandler, we love you. I also wanted to give a shout out to a couple of people though who sent us some pictures online this week. Cameron Stark watching the game with his son, and if you haven't seen this picture on the video, check it out on our Sound Off account. Man, is that kid into the game. Love to see it. Love to see the shirts. We got a couple of tweets this week from people around the JMU landscape who had bought our new merch. We saw Colin Lee at the viewing party in New York City. We started the merch thing as a little bit of fun to maybe give a different perspective on what a JMU shirt could look like. If you have ideas for things you'd like to see, as always, I want to shout out Andy Lynn, who's been coming up with these designs for us. You can get them in our Sound Off shop. We just appreciate everyone who's wearing them, having some fun with them. We've got some other designs we're thinking about, and you'll see them on the Sound Off store in the weeks to come. So if you're somebody who's looking for a Christmas present, looking for a way to maybe sport some of our shirts, if you bought a shirt, send us a picture in. We'd love to feature them on the broadcast, and you can shop the Sound Off store at jmusoundoff.com. I've got the yellow version of our logo on a long sleeve tee. I will say the premium long sleeve tee, phenomenal. So, and of note, noticing on the sizing a little bit, for if you're somebody who doesn't like a more modern fit, maybe boost it up a size. Noticing they do run a little smaller. So that's my last hawk for the marketing this week. But guys, thanks again. We do have a bye-week show coming up on Sunday. We're going to welcome in Scooter from the JMU Duke Club is going to be coming on to share his thoughts. We've got a couple of other guests that we're lining up for that. Roger Sankson from the JMU SMAD department. We're hoping to have him on as well as there's a podcast for Georgia Southern. Want to get the Georgia Southern perspective heading into the game. We'll also hear from Annie, our student correspondent, and maybe another special guest we're working on. So a jam-packed episode next Sunday at 8 p.m. And as always, on behalf of everyone with Sound Off, we appreciate the support. Thank you to Skyline Financial Partners. Thank you to the Montpelier Collective. And with that, as we end every week, go Dukes. We'll see you next Sunday for Sound Off, jmusoundoff.com. Thanks again, guys.